Okay, let's get started. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. If you're not familiar with us, Taboola is the world's largest discovery platform. Over 20,000 companies use us to reach over 1.4 billion people every month. I'm here to talk to you about how to build a content marketing strategy quickly. I'm really excited to have you all. Before I get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. As we're talking, on the right-hand side of the screen in the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a questions module. So feel free to ask us any questions throughout the webinar. And when I'm finished, at the end, I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can. If you'd like to tweet us, you can use the hashtag Taboola Insights, and we'll try to respond as soon as we can. So let's get started. So my name is Rachel Zalta. I head up Taboola's Global Research and Insights department. I have a master's in social psychology. My focus is on persuasion psychology, online behavior. I've been at Taboola for quite a while, and what I do at Taboola is I study online behavior based on data gathered from billions of recommendations worldwide. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn and, of course, Taboola Insights. Today, we're going to focus on three different things. The first is, when is content even used for performance? The second is to try to identify the marketing funnel stage. And the third, which is the most important part, is identifying your personas and deciding how to approach them from a content marketing perspective. Okay, so when is content used for performance? Traditionally, content was used mostly for awareness. So a brand would write a lot of content on their blog just to kind of get the word out there that they exist and create relationships without really focusing or even knowing that they can actually use this content for conversions too. Today, most brands are actually using content to reach their performance goals as well. And the reason why is because on average, a person consumes 11.4 pieces of content before making a purchase decision, which is actually kind of crazy. It makes sense, like if I think about my own user behavior, but that's why brands, they really need to focus on those 11.4 pieces of content if they want to lead to some kind of purchase afterwards. And that's kind of how content marketing was born. And a quick definition of content marketing by the Content Marketing Institute is that content marketing is a strategic marketing approach that focuses on relevant, valuable, consistent, and I'll add interesting content to attract and retain an audience. But ultimately, this is to also drive profitable customer action. So what we're going to focus on now is, when does content work best for performance? So one of the most obvious things is, of course, you can use content for performance. You can use content to kind of reach a new audience, an audience that doesn't know how to search for you, or an audience that isn't on any social platforms. So content is really important there. And content is really good for that too, because content isn't an aggressive sales approach. You're not, coming with a banner saying, buy now. And therefore, more people who haven't considered you before are going to be willing to consider you now. The second is when your market doesn't search for you because they don't know you're offering or that you even exist. So this is especially true for emerging brands or new products that kind of come up and people don't know to search for them yet because they're really new. So that's when discovery is really important, and content can be a really powerful tool there too. And this is something that I feel very strongly because I deal a lot with creatives. So when 60 characters just aren't enough. So sometimes for a lot of products, especially B2B, but really a lot of products, you're trying to describe your product in 60 characters in a title, or even if you have a short description, sometimes you just need more time and more space for your pitch, and that's where content can be really helpful. Another important point is when you're trying to build your brand's reputation. Again, this is really important for brands, and the idea here is that usually when you're distributing content, it appears on high quality premium sites, and this kind of it has like a halo effect on your brand as well that appears in those places, and it makes the consumer feel like your brand is also of high quality because it appears in this high quality site. And then the last one is when the hard sell isn't working. So here, a lot of brands, they'll have like banner ads or any kind of ads that are kind of a little bit more on the aggressive side, and sometimes they just don't work. And that's when it's really important to try the soft sell approach. And there's actually a lot of literature around soft sell. So this is like the basics of it. That with a soft sell technique, what happens is that brands are able to focus more on relationship building with their customers, and trust building, which is super important to a lot of brands and really any kind of services today. According to a lot of different studies, this is more persuasive. It's less likely to be irritating because it's not like in the customer's face. It's used by brands, but it's really used by anyone. It's used by anyone who wants to sell more than once. I think that's the most important point here. Because when you want to sell once, then you don't care. You'll just be irritating and annoying, and but if you want to create a relationship with a customer and get them to not only try your product once, but actually continue using your product or service, then that relationship part is really important. The soft sell is really important, and that's where content marketing is a really great tool for that. Okay, the second step that we're going to focus on is identifying the marketing funnel stage. Now, this is actually, it's kind of technical. It's a little bit obvious, but I'm going to go over it quickly just in case. So as you all know, there are different stages of the funnel. There's the top of the funnel, which is the awareness stage. That's when people are looking for answers, resources, education, research data, opinions, and insight. Then there's the middle of the funnel, which is the consideration phase. That's where people are doing some heavy research on whether or not the product or service is a good fit for them. And then, of course, there's the purchase stage, which is when people are figuring out exactly what it would take to become a customer. And then there's loyalty, of course, but we'll put that aside for now. Now, I'm assuming that if you're in this webinar, you've probably mastered the awareness stage and how to use content for awareness. So we'll put that aside for now, assuming that you already, your audience already knows about your product. So what we have left is the consideration phase, which is usually lead generation, and then we have purchases, decision, which is usually purchases. So how do we kind of know which KPI we should focus on? Should we focus on lead gen? Should we focus on actually measuring purchases? And in order to answer that, what we need to ask ourselves is if our product needs a long or short funnel. And we ran a really interesting analysis at Taboola, which looked at what is the average time between a click and a conversion for different types of products. So, for example, for kids fashion, right? If you're buying your kid a shirt, you could probably just buy it right away. You don't need so much time. But when we're talking about furniture or expensive items, that's something that needs more time to actually convert. So specifically furniture, right? You need to ask your partner if it's okay to buy this, if they like it. You need to measure. You need to you'll probably do a little bit more research to compare it to different products and different options that you have. And if your product takes a little bit longer to convert, you might want to focus on lead generation, while if your product people make that decision pretty quickly, then you could probably focus straight away on the decision phase. So we're up to the third thing that we want to talk about, which is identifying your personas and deciding how to approach each one of them. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on personas that basically we made up, right? You would have to figure out the personas that would work for your product or service. So we chose some like general personas here that we think can work for a lot, but here's the part where you really need to think, how do I make this work for me? Sorry. Okay, so let's start. So we're going to talk about 3 different people. We added their age and a name and a picture just to kind of give a face to the persona. But the truth is that the face, not the face, but the age and the gender really doesn't matter. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Or that's definitely something that Taboola, that's one of the things that we believe in. We believe in focusing on personas, which is the relationship that a market has with your product, instead of focusing on an age, which is sometimes an arbitrary thing that kind of limits like a brand in the end of the day. So we have Alex here, who's 32. He doesn't think he needs the product or service. Then we have Anna, who happens to be 41. She wants to use your product or service, but is considering your competitors as well. And then we have Joseph, who is 53. He was excited to hear about your product, but he just didn't sign up yet. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on each one of these and talk about what the content marketing strategy should be. But before we do that, I do, again, want to remind you all that this is where you guys kind of need to think a second and see, are these the personas you want to focus on, or can you think of any others? So we have some other examples here, like people who have never heard of your product service, right? That would be the awareness stage. People who might want to gift your product or service. I have to say that this is one of the best persona types that you can try out, because a lot of brands don't really go here. But a lot of people will gift a lot of different things to other people. So it's definitely something I would try. People who are looking for an alternative to a product or service that they're already using. People who are interested in a specific unique selling point that your product or service has. And then people who are interested in your product but are having a hard time understanding how to kind of convert, which I think is really true for a lot of financial products and others as well. Okay, so let's start with Alex. Alex doesn't think he needs your product or service. So we kind of tried to like dig into his brain a little bit. So he's seen the billboards, he knows the product, but he still isn't sure he needs this. And the idea there, from the content perspective, is to focus on how Alex especially can benefit from this offering. The product description, the unique selling points, those are all important things to include in this type of content. He's not in the mindset of buying, but he is willing to hear more. So again, remember Alex, he doesn't want to buy your product. He doesn't even think he needs your product, but he is interested enough to click on content about your product. So he's there to listen. But in that case, you really want to try to pitch your product a little bit less and focus more on valuable advice or insight that you can give Alex. And if he's still not convinced that the product is right for them, you can try to give him some kind of bonus offering if you have one. And again, if he's still not convinced, here you can mention stats from people similar to Alex that liked your product and include any kind of testimonials or reviews. So here's just, an example, the best phones that 2020 has to offer. Then Alex would kind of click and read about these different phones and see if maybe one of those phones is something that he's interested in. Here, what we suggest is a storytelling strategy. We suggest A/B testing 3 different articles. And the idea behind these articles is not to put a lot of call to actions on these articles, make them really story-like, but to make sure to collect data, because if we know that people who clicked on this are at least somewhat interested, and if they're spending time reading the content, then they're probably pretty interested. And then you definitely don't want to miss out on these people, and retargeting them can be really helpful later. So here we actually did an analysis, and we looked at what type of content worked well for February and what type of content worked well for March. Maybe COVID, had some kind of impact, and the answer is no. People are consuming the same type of content. People prefer clicking on any kind of content that includes photos and video, and just text is a little bit boring, although people are clicking on it. But if you can try to get a little bit creative with your content, then people are clicking on that more. And then especially today, looking at who your customers are and what they're going through during these times is really important. And helping these customers navigate through uncertainty in different times of crisis is also really important if it relates to your product. So we actually saw some brands doing amazing things. So Kelly Blue Book are doing, they're running content on how to clean your car to reduce the spread of coronavirus, which is something that their customers are worried about. And they're kind of there, like giving their customers answers and helping them out during this difficult time. And Salesforce actually has a lot of content about COVID and how to help their customers basically through this time. So one of the examples there is how to maintain customer relationships while working remotely, which I really liked. And then there are a lot of examples here, but Healthcare Source are giving advice on hiring in a time of crisis. So, you know, really trying to adjust your content to be relevant is also a really important thing, especially during these times. Okay, so we spoke about Alex and using the storytelling approach and different ideas there. Now let's focus on Anna. So Anna wants to use your product, but she's considering the competition and she's still doing a little bit of research. So what's Anna thinking? So Anna has heard about your brand and she knows in general what you have to offer. But in order to really convince Anna that your offer is better than others, you need to talk about your unique selling points and why they're good for Anna in particular. Here, your content and creative titles can be a little bit more direct and can include words like shop now or X% off, which is not suggested for Alex, right? Because Alex he's not in that mindset to kind of click on something that says shop now. But for Anna, you can say that. But since she's considering other alternatives, here you want to give her a reason to choose you over other offerings by focusing on your unique selling points and even comparing your product to others. So here the example is this adjustable desk will prevent back pain when working from home from some kind of furniture advertiser. You know, we're telling people that we're talking about the unique selling points of this adjustable desk. Of course, the content is going to mirror this. And here, the strategy is less of a storytelling strategy and more of a direct response strategy. Here, what we recommend is distributing a landing page to convert the audiences. You'll have many CTAs here, but you will have a focus on your unique selling points too. And then we have Joseph, of course. I love this picture. He seems like such a cute guy, no? Like such a nice guy. So he was really excited to hear about your product, but he didn't sign up yet. So what's Joseph thinking? So he's interested in what you have to offer, but he maybe needed a little bit of time. So here you can just remind him kindly by using retargeting. And if he still wants more time, you can either remind him again, or you can try to offer him some kind of limited time offer, or use a little bit more urgency in your language by saying things like buy now. So the example here is sign up today and start investing your money. And here the idea is to use a landing page again for a retargeting campaign. Here you'll have many CTAs, and here one of the important things to keep in mind is not to interrupt their online experience. I'm sure you guys have all felt this as consumers, right? You'll be reading an article and then you'll get like a pop-up or something really annoying that's grabbing your attention. And even Joseph, who wants to convert, right? He just needed a reminder. He's probably not going to convert if you do it in a way that's really annoying. So try to not do that and choose ways to engage with him in places that aren't as interruptive. For example, in Taboola, we appear in the bottom of the article, which is a very not interruptive place, which is what we call moments of next. And I'll actually have another webinar talking about that too. Cool. So this is a quick summary of what we suggest for a content marketing campaign. So we have Alex here, and we suggest having 3 different storytelling articles for him, geared towards him, with with one CTA. Then for Anna and Joseph, we recommend more CTAs talking specifically about your unique selling points and really pitching your product there. And of course, Joseph would be a retargeting campaign. So a few takeaways. Number 1, remember that content can be used for performance, especially in certain situations, which I mentioned before. For example, you're trying to build your brand's reputation, or for example, 60 characters is enough, etc. Number 2, identify your marketing funnel stage. That's pretty important to know kind of what you're measuring. And then number 3 is identifying your personas and deciding how to approach each one of them with different kinds of content. Cool. And then today, we spoke about the strategy, but next week, Megan Morial, and I'll show you guys this in a second, is actually going to be talking not about the strategy, but how to even write these articles. And she's awesome. I highly recommend joining. So this is it. As you probably all know, this is one webinar out of a weekly series that we're doing. We started last week. We had a webinar on how brands communicate in times of crisis. If you haven't heard the webinar, feel free to check it out. Today we spoke about content strategy, and then next week Megan's going to talk about. Megan is a former journalist, and she's talking about how to create awesome sponsored content. So if you want to sign up to the webinar series, feel free to go to explore.taboola.com/taboola-insights-webinars. Okay, so we're in the questions stage of this webinar. I hope this was interesting for you. I'm seeing a bunch of questions coming in. Before I actually read them, I'm going to tell you all that this is going to be recorded and it will be sent to anybody who signed up. So you don't have to ask about that. I get that question a lot, so I like to start with it. And then I'll take a couple minutes to kind of read what we have here. Okay, so I see one question here. When I run a campaign, I usually focus only on age and gender. Should I be focusing on personas too? So in my opinion, absolutely. Even if you're talking about age and gender, you still need to focus on the personas. Even if you want to focus on a specific age group, you still need to understand, what is the relationship between those people and your product or service, right? And then based on that, kind of build a content strategy around that. Okay, I see another question. How do I know which personas to choose? Okay, so that's a really good question. It takes time, and it's not a simple answer. It's something that what I do is I'll sit together with a team and we'll just brainstorm, right? We'll try to dig into some data. If you have access to Google Analytics, if you can ask your customers why they converted, that's also really helpful. But understanding your market, understanding your unique selling points will really help you. Point to the personas that you should be focusing on. And then I have another question on how many personas should I choose? So I usually recommend choosing 3. You can also choose 4. It just gets a little complicated. So I usually suggest testing 3 and then kind of, pausing one if you feel like it's not really converting for you, and trying a new one afterwards. Okay, should I choose different personas for different markets? Yes, absolutely. Like it's not all, I don't think you always need to choose different personas for different countries, right? Or different markets, but definitely you might sell the same product in one country and another, and like your personas will be different depending on, what's happening in that country right now and what the unique selling points are and how they relate to the people in that country. And then I have a question. Oh, I like this question. What other resources do you have for me to use when putting together a content marketing campaign? So if any of you have ever heard any of the webinars that I gave, you probably know this by heart. But one of the resources that I always talk about is trends.taboola.com. So trends.taboola.com is a website that you all have access to. And what it has is an analysis of every single one of the creatives that were on Taboola on a weekly basis. So it takes all of the creatives that ran, which are billions and billions, and it analyzes them for best practices to tell you things like, should you use an image of a man or an image of a woman? Should you use an animal in your picture or not? And we also have video insights and keyword insights and a lot of really cool creative tools there. So that's a really great tool that I would use. Of course, we also have other webinars, which you could check out in our YouTube channel. And our help center is really helpful there. Yeah. Okay, so we're running out of time, so we're going to end here. But I really enjoyed this webinar. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Again, feel free to reach out and feel free to send out any questions that you'd like. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.